Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hope Dorman, Senior Content Marketing Manager here at Kajabi. So I am particularly thrilled to bring on Justin Welsh, who is going to be talking about a topic near and dear to my heart, systemizing your content structure. For an intro on Justin, over the last decade, he's helped build two $50 million plus ARR companies, teams of over 150 people, and raise over $300 million in venture capital. And now he's building a portfolio of one-person businesses to $5 million in revenue. And outside of that, he's an advisor to early stage SMB SaaS companies, mentor to entrepreneurs at a lot of startups, and an LP at GTM Fund, which is a rolling fund investing $4 million per year into early stage B2B SaaS companies. So what an impressive resume, am I right? Justin, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to jamming out with the audience.
Awesome. So Justin, I'll hand it over to you now for your workshop. And then with about 10 minutes left in the session, I'll come back for the Q&A portion. So get those questions in the chat and hopefully we'll be able to answer yours.
Awesome. Can you see my screen? Cool. Well, thanks so much, Hope, for the great introduction. I appreciate it. My name's Justin Welsh, and today I'm going to be going over a presentation called Building a Systematized Content Strategy. And really the focus here is trying to build a high volume, high quality content system for social media. So as Hope mentioned, and I won't go into my bio, I'm a former startup executive, built a couple of companies with some friends of mine, left that world back in 2019, and kind of stumbled into the creator world unexpectedly. Just by writing on LinkedIn about building SaaS companies, I eventually transitioned over to Twitter, started writing there. I've got almost 500,000 followers across those two platforms, do about 350 million yearly content impressions. My business is a seven-figure one-person business with 5 different revenue streams that operates around 95% margins, and I use 0 advertisements. So everything that I do is through organic social media strategy, and that's what I'm going to walk you through today. So before I walk you through it, I think it's really important to ask ourselves, why is it important to have a systematized content strategy? And that is because every person that you think of as a creative, whether that's a music artist, somebody who writes music, an author who writes books, they all use systems for their content. Music artists have formulas, movies have templated scripts, books have templated storylines. And I think it's really strange that us as creators or folks who create on social media are held to a different standard. And I like to bring some of the systems that I learned in my last business into sort of the creator realm. And systems for me are there when motivation isn't. So I'm sure we've all woken up in the morning before and not wanted to write content, not wanted to produce videos, not wanted to record our podcast. And that's where systems are there. Systems are the safety net for when motivation is not there. And I'm going to walk you through my favorite system today. And it is a 9-step system that I call the content operating system that keeps me creating roughly 30 pieces of net new social media content every single week for LinkedIn and Twitter. Part of this social media strategy is not just about the creation of the actual content, but it's how the content works together to deplatform users, to take them off of your favorite social media channels like LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and get them onto your website where they can start browsing your products and services and sign up for things like your email newsletter. So my system works as a hub and spoke model. The hub of my system is a piece of long form content that I send once a week. That's my newsletter called The Saturday Solopreneur. It's a newsletter that goes out every Saturday morning. You can read it in 4 minutes or less, and it gives one actionable tip to grow your online audience and business. And the spokes of this model are the content that comes off of that actual hub. It's a lot like Gary Vee's sort of content pillar strategy, but slightly different in the way that we actually use the spokes of this model to bring people off social media and onto your website. So let's walk through the system itself. Step 1 is simply ideation. And ideation just means coming up with new ideas for that long form piece of content. And that can be a newsletter, a podcast, a YouTube series. It does not have to be only a newsletter. It can be a blog. It's anything that is long form that is produced in a regular fashion. So I have this picture on my calendar here, and every Wednesday around 10:30 Central Time, I carve out an hour, and that hour is dedicated to one thing, and that is coming up with new ideas. And that I spend that hour kind of searching through a bunch of different mediums. So I might look at YouTube channels, read other people's newsletters, look at curated emails, check out popular content, read through LinkedIn, read through Twitter to try and find ideas. So for example, here's my buddy Matt Ragland. He does YouTube videos. I sort by most popular. What are people enjoying that he's creating? How I journal every day for increased productivity. There's a great idea that I could riff on and give my take on. I might read a curated newsletter. So how to promote and grow your podcast. Simple idea. I could write about that. I could record content about that. I look at my tweet threads or tweets that have been popular, like here's my 4-step writing process. That was my third most or second most popular tweet of all time. I might turn that into a newsletter. That's a great place to find ideas. And for this example, I'm going to show you an idea that came across my plate the other day, where I was reading a curated newsletter and Dan McKinley was talking about how he went from 100 to 5,000 Twitter followers. So I thought, that's a great idea. Why don't I write about my take on growing from 0 to 5,000 Twitter followers, which I did last year. I'm now over 160,000. But it's like, what about the folks who want to go from just 0 to 5,000? How do we get them there? So I selected this idea for my newsletter. And you can see inside of Notion, which is a piece of software, and you can use Google Drive, you can use Notion, you can use a piece of paper if you want it, right? I just collect these ideas on a regular basis. So how to get your first 5,000 Twitter followers simply became an idea in my idea bank. Once I have an idea, I like to go out and do some research. So of course, there's the way that I would go from growing from 0 to 5,000 Twitter followers for this example, but there's probably a lot of other information online and from friends of mine and peers of mine on social media that might be able to add some additional color or flair to my newsletter. So I might do something like go out and search for tweets, quotes, books, articles, anything that supports what I'm going to write about. And step 2 is I store all of my research in my Notion document. So for example, I might go to advanced Twitter search and type in Twitter growth tip and come up with a bunch of folks who have shared their own Twitter growth tips. And you can see here, there's 4 that just came up: Jeremy, JK, Tebow, Chase, all folks that I know, all friends of mine. I might select Jeremy Moser's Twitter growth tip, and he's got 3 bullet points right here. So I would simply install that tweet into my step 2 research. So it's easy for me to have access immediately to that piece of research that I want to then put into my newsletter. So you can see when I wrote my newsletter on how to grow your first 5,000 Twitter followers, I simply took the piece of research from Jeremy and installed it into my newsletter as a way to back up what I was saying. So I added some other color or flair from an additional creator. Once I've written my newsletter, this is where the system really starts to take off, right? So the step 3 is here's me writing this newsletter. I have a template that I use, and I write using a how-to step-by-step template. I use a very similar template every week. Here's the problem. Here's how most people handle the problem. Here's how I would handle it. And I find templates in all of the most interesting places. This is a piece of content, piece of software called TypeShare. And inside of TypeShare, there are templates that you can use: how-to guides, grocery lists, 5 main points, dispelling myths, telling a personal story. And you can just take one of these templates and use it for your newsletter. So I'll write out my newsletter on how to grow your first 5,000 Twitter followers, including some of that research I shared earlier from guys like Jeremy. Once the newsletter is done at the center of your hub and spoke content, the rest of this becomes so easy because you have a topic that you can now think through all the time. Our topic: how to grow from 0 to 5,000 Twitter followers. Around that hub, that newsletter, there are going to be 6 individual pieces of content that we're going to create together: a story, an observation, a contrarian take, a past versus present, a listicle, and a tweet thread. So let me show you how I do that. Step 4 is taking our long form content and turning it into short form content. So I'll start by looking at the different styles. And style number 1 is a story. So with that in mind, how to grow to your first 5,000 Twitter followers, I will turn that into a story. And a story has 5 parts: pain, agitation, intrigue, positive future, and solution. And so I will simply write a story right inside of this operating system, right underneath my newsletter. And you can see the story template here and how I fill it out. So pain and attention: use a personal story, start with a problem. Agitate, twist the knife, really tell the reader how things got worse and what happened to you or someone else. Dive into the intrigue, paint a positive picture of their future if they use the new intriguing solution. and then deliver the solution to your audience. A simple way to take a piece of long form content and turn it into a piece of short form content like a story. Once we have our story written, I want to turn it into an observation. So again, our topic, how to grow to 5,000 Twitter followers, where what's something interesting that I noticed in growing my own account to 5,000 followers. So here's an observation. Accounts growing crazy fast don't have the best content. They have a clear profile, helpful content, and a deep network. Nothing fancy, all meaningful. Not my best content ever, but a simple observation that I can write about growing to 5,000 Twitter followers. So we're starting to develop the spokes of our hub and spoke content. And once we create all of our spokes, we're going to bring everyone back to our website to make purchases, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Once you have your observation, you want to go ahead and create a contrarian take. So what's a commonly held belief that you think is wrong in this instance about growing to 5,000 Twitter followers? So for example, I'll write something that I think nobody else thinks. Like growing fast on Twitter has almost nothing to do with relevant experience. It's about growing a powerful online network of peers. Then add creativity, confidence, experimentation, and repeatable systems. So this is a piece of content that I wrote that's a contrarian take on what it takes to grow on Twitter. And I just create these on a regular basis. Story, observation, contrarian take. Once I've got my contrarian take, I turn the same topic into a listicle. So how can I write a listicle? What are some tools, books, newsletters that I can use to write about on this relevant topic? So for example, here are 6 tools every Twitter creator should know about to help them grow to 5,000 followers. And then I list out 6 simple tools, right? So I've got 4 of my 6 spokes done. My next spoke is past versus present. So for example, what did it look like to grow on Twitter in 2019? Or what was I doing on Twitter in 2019? And then what am I doing on Twitter in 2022? So in 2019, I was doing all the wrong things. In 2022, I'm doing these 4 right things. So just a simple juxtaposition of history. What was happening in 2019? What's happening in 2022? A simple piece of content that comes off of that newsletter. So now we've got 5 out of our 6 spokes filled out. And the last spoke is just a Twitter thread for me. And this can be something else for you. You don't have to follow these exact 6 pieces of content. So for me, I'll take my newsletter and I'll copy and paste it and I'll put it into my publishing tool. I'll separate it out into 280 character increments and I'll turn it into a very simple Twitter thread, like the one I'm writing right now for this newsletter. How to add 5,000 Twitter followers in just 90 days, a 4-step playbook that anyone can run. So I will just simply use the newsletter that I wrote, turn it into a Twitter thread, and distribute it on Twitter. So once you have your 6 pieces of content, you have a couple of different options. The first option is you can tie all 6 pieces of these content back to your newsletter. And the second option is you can go around the spoke circle again. Second story, second observation, second thread, contrarian take, past versus present, and listicle. And you can come up with anywhere from 6 to 12 pieces of unique content that are all relevant to this very specific topic that you wrote a newsletter about. And when your short form content, all your written content on LinkedIn or Twitter, or your short form videos on Instagram or TikTok, when they're related to a long form piece of content, like a newsletter, like a podcast, like a YouTube series, you can tie all of those back using a simple link. So that's what I do over the next 6 to 12 weeks. So over the next 6 to 12 weeks, I will stagger all of my content. On Monday, I'll tell a story. The following Tuesday, I'll share an observation. 3 Wednesdays from now, a listicle. 4 Thursdays, a Twitter thread. 5 Fridays, a contrarian take, so on and so forth. So that I'm not talking about the exact same topic 5 days or 6 days or 12 days in a row. I'm talking about that topic over the course of time. And the great thing is, all of these short form pieces of social media content, again, they all tie back to my newsletter. So at the end of each short form piece of content, I say, would you like to learn more about this specific topic? If you'd like to learn more about this topic, here's a newsletter issue I've written about growing on Twitter to 5,000 followers. So when they read my observation, when they read my listicle, when they read my thread, I can assume that if they've read those pieces of content, engaged, commented, liked them, that this topic must be interesting to them. And if this topic is interesting to them, they should want to go from my social media content onto my website. And so when you set it up like this, you start to see a significant number of website impressions, and you start to see your traffic increase. So you can see here in the start of the year, I was doing roughly 10,000 or so, looks like a week, maybe 8,000 visitors to my website a week. And now I'm, hitting around 16 to 18,000 visitors on my website per week. And in the last 6 months, organically, with 0 advertisements and only 2 social media channels, I've driven 1.8 million page views in 6 months across Twitter and LinkedIn. And when you're selling services or when you're selling digital products, it really is a numbers game. So if you drive 1.8 million people, especially people who have read a piece of content of yours that they like, that's relevant to them, that helps them solve a challenge or educates them or keeps them motivated or empathizes with them, if you're bringing those people 1.8 million times over 6 months to your website, they are now deplatformed. They can do simple things on your website that you want. They can sign up for your newsletter. They can browse your services. They can check out your products. They can reach out to you via a contact form. You're in such a better position when folks are on your website versus when they're simply interacting with you on social media. So I go from producing this content to bringing them to my website 1.8 million times in 6 months. And that's where I generate my business revenue. So that 1.8 million, views on my website turns into a little over 700,000 in course and coaching sales in 6 months. So this is the entire engine that drives my business. So to sort of recap, I start off with a hub and spoke model. And the hub is really a long form piece of content: newsletter, YouTube video, podcast. Off of that idea comes 6 to 12 distinct pieces of content that are highly related to the newsletter topic or to the long form topic. Over the next 6 to 12 weeks, you stagger that content on social media. And every time you end that content, you tie back to your newsletter. You tie back to your podcast, website. You tie back to your YouTube video section of your website, whatever you want people to do on your website. And there you have that captive audience where they can now do the things I described: subscribe to your newsletter, subscribe to your YouTube channel, buy a product, or buy a service. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how I help people build diversified portfolios of internet income, you can go check out my website. It's justinwelsh.me. That's justinwelsh.me. And for any of my products that you see, if they're relevant to you, there's lots of free content. There's 4 free guides. There's 31 free newsletter issues. There's a ton of free content on there. So feel free to check out all the free content first. Probably solve most of your problems. If you want to pick up a course of mine, you can use the coupon code Kajabi for 20% off. And that is my 9-step content operating system. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, that was super, super fantastic. Super really actionable insights. As a content marketer myself, I'm always looking for ways to streamline our content production. And I just want to, give an extra little plus one that these are some super great tips, and really great to see not only how you can leverage one idea across so many different types of posts, but also strategically spread it out, build out that editorial calendar so you aren't talking about the same thing all the time. You can also consistently drive that organic traffic to your website. So super great stuff here. Let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A. First question is from Jeffrey. Justin mentioned taking an hour on Wednesdays to come up with the topics. Approximately how long for the other steps of the hub?
Yeah, great question. So because I use templates to write my newsletter, and by the way, people are always, they think templates, they think, oh, doesn't everybody sound the same? No, just vessels through which you share information. So for me, it's just, I have my templated newsletter. So it takes me about 45 minutes now to write a newsletter. My newsletters are short. They can be read in less than 4 minutes. It used to take me 2 hours to write my newsletter. I've written 31 of them, so that has gotten shorter and shorter over time. But it started with about 2 hours. I'm down to about 45 minutes now. On Monday is when I write my newsletters. And then on Tuesday, I write my spoke content. So I'll take about 2 hours on Tuesday, and I'll write anywhere from, usually I write 12 to 20 pieces of content because I like to have extras that are there for future use when I go on vacation, things like that. But anywhere from 1 to 2 hours on Tuesday to depending on how creative I feel. And then usually 30 minutes on Wednesday, I'll spend editing my newsletter to make sure that it's ready to publish on Saturday. But that's really it.
That's great. And one thing you said during your presentation, you mentioned, I think it was about your contrarian take. You're like, this isn't the best piece of content I've ever produced. And that's really helpful. That takes the pressure off. Obviously, things still need to be a relatively, there's still a level of quality that serves your brand best, but it takes the pressure off that not every single tweet, not every single, maybe for someone's a TikTok video or YouTube video, that it can just be something. You just need to get it done. And that was a thing we talked about in another session. So that really takes the pressure off, and hearing that you're spending about 2 hours is great, that it's just kind of about getting something done, and done is better than perfect.
Yep. And you can write headlines, write ideas, just get it out there, get it into your publishing tool. Like when the day comes up for the content to go out, you can make it better.
Right. Absolutely. Sometimes sleeping on it too, where you get another idea when you're not just like staring at it for, a few hours at a time, that you can always iterate on it too. So Joe Marie asked, how do you create a posting schedule at times for LinkedIn?
Yeah, I use a couple different tools. So first of all, like the most common questions I get are what tools, what time, what type. Doesn't really matter. Whatever's best for you. The most important thing is consistency. And so like, I never try and say, oh, you should post at X time, or you should use X software, because like, just use what's easiest for you, because what really matters is that you keep going. It's a marathon. Right. Sometimes it's just the last person standing is sometimes, who wins in the content game. But with that being said, I use a piece of software called Publer, PUBLER.io. And it just lets me schedule my content out in advance at the times that I choose. And the times that I choose are 7:15 in the morning Central Time and noon Central Time, just because that's generally when I can be at my computer to engage with my audience. But you pick whatever times are most, accurate for you, or best for you, and stay consistent.
Yeah. And there's a number of algorithms or tools that you can use. Like, for example, if one of the channels that someone is using is YouTube, you can go into the analytics and see what time your audience is on YouTube. But as you said, also at the time that you can sit at your computer and engage with the comments, that's really helpful too. Amanda asks, if you already have an existence on all social channels, should you scale back to focus on one or two channels for impact, value, and conversions? What do you think on that one?
My thought process is you should start with one social channel until you truly understand all of the nuances. So for example, I started on LinkedIn in late 2018. It's a weird creator channel choice. It just, my buddies were writing on there, so I just chose it. I'm glad I did. But I figured it out over the last 3 years. So now I understand it. I know what works. I understand how to use it. And as soon as I understood it as deep as I thought I could, I had a bank of 3 years worth of content. And so I went over to Twitter. I had no followers, and I went 0 to 160,000 in 10 months. And that's not because I really understood Twitter even that well. It's just I had a whole bank of content, and I could look at the other content and say, here's 1,500 pieces. Here are the top 50 things I've ever written. They'll probably play well over here. So I just started with a bang because I knew I had decent content from another platform. So I would say go really deep until you get really strong traction, you understand the nuances, and then bring all of your best content over to a new platform, adjust it so that you can understand how it works within the new platform, and start kind of, double dipping once you have one platform figured out.
Yeah, that's super huge. I mean, trying to grow an audience can be hard, and there's a lot of times it's volume. You do have to be on there every single day. And so instead of trying to spread yourself thin on 4 or 5 channels, just be really good at one thing, because you can always get to those channels. Or I know, I think it was Jessica Hawk speaking earlier about getting into a new channel, and that can help you drive growth there. So whenever that new thing comes up, if you've already mastered something, you can jump on that new one when you have content to share and recycle, and just kind of streamline your workflow on that one.
One thing I'll add that's helpful is if you become sort of, and I'm using this word, it's not the right word, but like if you sort of become like the master at one platform where you understand it really deeply and you want to go to another platform, there's going to be someone from that platform who wants to go master the one that you understand. And so you're like, hey, I get this. I'll tell you everything I know about this. Can you tell me everything you know about this? Accelerated growth.
Right, right. So many opportunities for shared learnings, but also content collaborations too, cross posting, affiliate marketing, all that good stuff. But absolutely, teaming up with someone else who has, a complementary skill set. It's a win-win situation for sure. Cool. So Roman asks, what if I don't have a long form content to be my spoke? Maybe he means hub. Got my LinkedIn plus short form newsletter, shorter than yours, more like marketing examples.
Yeah, cool. That's okay. That's a piece of long form content. I use the word long form, and it's maybe a bad choice of words. What I meant by that is content that exists to show your expertise that exists somewhere outside of a social media platform. Because a social media platform is an echo chamber. You can shout into it all you want, but if you never deplatform someone to your website, it's just harder for them to interact with you on a regular basis. You get lost in the algorithm, you get shadow banned, you whatever, right? All these different weird things happen. So for a short form newsletter, if it exists on your website, it's perfect. Like even if it's just a 60-second read, just that idea you can riff off of so easy. Like if you tell an idea about how to build a great landing page, well, tell a story about the time you tried and failed. Make an observation about your 3 favorite landing pages, 6 tools to build landing pages, what a landing page looked like in 2015, what it'll look like in 2023, right? There's a million pieces of content you can just spoke right off of that come to mind instantly, and then drive everyone back to your short form, newsletter. Even if it's a 60-second read, because you'll bring them to your website where you can show your products and services.
Absolutely. This is a great question from Brandy. Once they are on the site, do they get the long form piece or an opt-in to get it? What's your strategy there?
I don't like gating content because I don't like to barter with my audience. I don't like to say like, hey, you've been a fan or a follower or just someone who reads my stuff. Maybe you don't even like me, you just read my stuff. I don't like to say now, I want to give you something a little more, but I don't want to give it to you yet. You got to give me this thing. And now we're in like a trade-off. The way that I think about it is meet your audience where they want to be met. So I put my newsletter on my website. If you don't want to subscribe, you can just go there and read it every Saturday. It makes no difference to me. What I care about is that you read it. If you want it in your inbox, you can subscribe to it. So if you like email, subscribe. If you don't, go to the blog or the newsletter. If you like shorter form content, go read my LinkedIn or Twitter stuff. But I never want to force my audience to make them feel like we're having a transactional relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tons of different theory on opt-in, but I love making it available to people whichever way they want to read it. And ultimately in the long term, that'll come back and serve you best. So thank you so much to Justin. Really appreciate you being here today and sharing your strategy. I learned a lot. I know lots of other people learned a lot. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.